right, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome to a Wednesday morning edition of the Back Deck Bible Study. Hopefully, it doesn't start raining because it's threatening. I just felt a couple drops, but I think we'll be all right. Who knows? Okay, so we're in Revelation 17 today. I got to tell you, I'm liking Wednesday. If anybody has any opinions on Wednesday over Monday, let me know, and we may move it. Just wait and see. Um, but let's just jump into Revelation 17. It's a really important chapter, and it's really getting ready to rain. It's really going to rain on me. I'm trying to decide if my stuff will get trouble if it gets wet. It's raining. Let's just keep moving. Okay, Revelation 17. Let's start in verse 1. Uh, One of the seven angels who had the seven bowls came and said to me, "Come, I'll show you the punishment of the great prostitute who sits by many waters." And just a quick note, water for us is where we go on vacation. Water for them was the primary method of consumption and production. If you made anything, you had to ship it over the water. That's why Rome, if you look at Rome, it is just an outline of the Roman Empire was an outline of the Mediterranean Sea. So sits on many waters. That's where the commerce is, the commercial stuff is. Verse 2. With her the kings of the earth committed adultery, and the inhabitants of the earth were intoxicated with the wine of her adulteries. And here he's sort of setting something up, and he's really referring back to Jeremiah chapter 51, verses 6 and 7, which say, "Flee from Babylon, run for your lives. Do not be destroyed because of her sins. It is time for the Lord's vengeance. He will repay her what she deserves." And verse 7, "Babylon was a gold cup in the Lord's hand. She made the whole earth drunk. The nations drank her wine. Therefore, they have now gone mad." And by the time we get to here, in a lot of ways, Babylon is a meme for the powerful country that, or nation or city state that is getting the nations drunk. Okay. And so that's what's going on here. I want to keep reading just a little bit more, and we'll get to something really important right off the bat. Verse 3 says this: "Then the angel carried me away into the spirit into a wilderness. There I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast that was covered with blasphemous names and had 7 heads and 10 horns." Now, I talked about last time about how there are two women, there are two scenes. There's the woman with the unholy unholy hooker. I think I said the unholy hooker, and then there's the bride of Christ, the two women, and John is carried away to look at each one. And it's important to notice that John is transported into the wilderness for this one. Now, for us, again, when we think water, we think beach. When they saw water, they saw commerce. When we see wilderness, we see hostile, we see negative. In the book of Revelation, wilderness is protection. If you remember that big story that sort of defined the whole midsection of the book, is where the woman who represents all of God's people throughout history is giving birth to the child who is Jesus, and she gives birth to the child, and the dragon is trying to kill the child, and then the God basically takes the woman and transports her into the wilderness where she can be kept safe while Jesus goes on straight to heaven. And then it's important to note, remember, there are people who are not in the wilderness with the woman who represents us as a totality. All the people who have been the people of God throughout history, we're represented in that woman. But there are always people who are not in the wilderness with her, who are at risk, as it were. If you go to the other place, it talks about going into the temple, and the inner temple is sealed for that 1400 and some weeks, that symbol that he's coming up, and they're in there. But the outer courts is trampled by the Gentiles, and there are Christians. There are the two witnesses. There are others who are sent out into the court of the trampling, where the trampling going. So as a whole and as individuals in some way, we are corporately safe. We are secure in God's wilderness. But as individuals, while our salvation is securely kept because we're part of the woman who is in the wilderness, we as individuals are out frequently in harm's way. We are where bad things can happen because we are the witnesses. We are the ones who are carrying on the work of God. So we're secure eternally, but we are unsafe in some ways when it comes to living in this world. And it's very interesting that John is transported to the wilderness to view the woman. Now, is the woman in the wilderness? No. The woman he's viewing, the woman who's riding the beast with all the horns, and as we'll see, and all that stuff that's going on in there, She's not in the wilderness. John is taken to a safe place where he can observe her. And that's a really important point, because what's happening is this woman has gotten the nations drunk. Okay, we'll see. We'll keep walking through this. But Christians aren't immune to getting caught up by Babylon. Babylon is always capturing Christians, at least temporarily, and getting us drunk so we can't see straight. It's a very normal thing. We mentioned once earlier about, if you go back to throughout church history, that Christians aren't like always right on things, that we mess up. That if you go to the German church in the 1930s, that there was a huge percentage of the church that thought Hitler was the best option, and Bonhoeffer was in trouble and eventually executed, partly because the church would not accept him because he was standing up against Hitler. If you go to China, okay, and in China today, there is an official Chinese church. Matter of fact, there's three. There's one for the Catholics, there's one for the evangelicals, and one for the Protestants. And there is an official church that buys in and supports the Chinese Communist Party. Now, you mind if I just take this just a second? I think in America what happens, and I'm going to be a little prophetic and not mean, but slightly prophetic. Um, in America, Satan has got us to where there's a two-party system, okay? And we have this idea that as long as we align with the right one, we're okay. But the reality is, I think both can be Babylon. Both have problems. Both have serious issues. And if we too closely identify with either, and it says right before an election, of course, if we too closely identify with either political party, we're at risk of drinking the wine, as it were. We're in harm's way. Our job is to be the prophets. And I say this a lot, but it's such a big deal to me. It's so important to me that we're the ones who stand for Christ no matter the political situation. And we stand opposed to anything that's wrong, and we stand in favor of anything that's right. And our job is always that. So we're not safe. Okay, John is transported to the wilderness where it's safe, where he can observe the prostitute, the unholy hooker, and not be seduced by her. But we have to watch. We are not immune to being seduced by the unholy hooker, as has been shown throughout church history. We're safe. The woman is safe in the wilderness. We have our eternal security, but we have to be wise. We have to continue to stay wise in the world we live in. Okay. Now, so let's keep going. Do that in there for the fun of it. So we've got the prostitute. It says in verse 4. Says, we go back to verse 3. She was a woman. She was sitting on a scarlet beast that was covered with blasphemous names and had 7 heads and 10 horns. So this is one or maybe both symbolically of the beasts we've encountered earlier, which are the powers of Satan on earth. Okay, this is the power of Satan on earth working, and he is working through the woman who is Babylon. She is the government that he is working through. And it says she was dressed in purple and scarlet, and was glittering with gold and precious stones and pearls. Now, she is not a street corner hooker. This is an extremely high-priced courtesan. See if I can find this real fast. The purple that she wears, it was called porphyra. It's a dye made from tens of thousands of rock snails. You take tens of thousands of rock snails, you smash them up, and you make this purple dye. It was, as you might imagine, labor intensive, which made the dye very expensive and valuable. And it was so valuable that the Roman government regulated it. Only certain people were allowed to buy it. You had to be a certain level of importance to even buy the purple. So she's wearing this purple that is incredibly valuable purple. This clothing she wears, even if the clothing itself were not valuable, which it probably would be expensive clothing, you wouldn't die inexpensive. You're not going to go to Dollar General and buy the cheapest t-shirt they have and dye it with this purple. You're not going to do it. You're only going to take the best clothing and dye it purple. And the red's not that much different. The scarlet was made from beetles. It was a similar process to the snails. So these are two highly expensive dyes that are put on very expensive clothing. And so she's dressed in purple and scarlet with glittering gold and precious stones and pearls. And it's interesting. I'm just going to leave this, just put it here and leave it for later. Those are the same things we're going to find used as construction materials in the New Jerusalem. Just saying. But they're incredibly valuable here. And she held a golden cup in her hand. So right up till this point, while we kind of know she's a bad lady, she's rich, beyond rich. She's holding a golden cup. But then it says it was filled with abominable things and the filth of her adulteries. Abominable things, the filth of her adulteries. That word abominable, it's the word that in Luke 16, Jesus says, you're the ones who justify yourselves in the eyes of others, but God knows your heart. What people value highly is detestable in God's sight. And that's the abominations, the things that God finds detestable. When Antiochus Epiphanes came in hundreds of years earlier into the temple and sacrificed a pig, it was called the abomination, and that's that same word. Taking a pig and sacrificing in the temple. That's what it is, full of abominations. We'll see specifically what it is in just a minute. But then it says, the name written on her forehead was a mystery. Mystery has to be revealed. Not obviously true. Babylon the Great, the mother of prostitutes and of the abominations of the earth. Now, John is going to make it very, very clear as he goes through what city he's talking about. He's going to make it very, very obvious. But he says it's a mystery, which means it's not really Babylon, because Babylon was nothing at that point in time. So it's not Babylon. It's something else. It's another city. It's another government. Okay? And you guys already know what it is. It's Rome. But I'm gonna just, we'll pretend like there's a mystery. Okay? And I would say also, just to make it clear, when it says that, she's her adulteries and all those things, throughout the Bible, adultery and prostitution are used as symbols. They're bad. They're considered wrong, but they're used frequently by all the prophets, as I would say all the prophets, by the prophets as symbols of moving away from God. Okay, one person even said, I don't know how fully accurate this is, but adultery is when a believer rejects God in favor of a foreign god or a foreign power or a foreign influence, or like riches, wealth, power, anything like that, or a real life idol. When a Christian or a follower of God does it, it's adultery, and when a non-Christian does it, it's prostitution. Somebody who's not a relationship with God. So she's there, and she's got all this stuff, and she's seducing people with the wine, which are full of the lies and the abominations, and she's seducing them with whatever it takes to get them on her side. Like I said, most of the time that's going to be economic. If you look at the Roman Empire, which I said we're actually talking about Rome here, the Roman Empire had a carrot and a stick approach that they used to keep people in line. And they would start with the stick. They would beat you into submission with the Roman legions, with the Roman army. But then they brought the carrot out, which was, oh, and if you're in our group, you get access to all the resources. You get the roads, you get the boats, you get the protection, you get all the money that flows through your economy because you're cooperating with us. Now, as long as you cooperate with us, the money keeps flowing, the power keeps flowing. So as we've seen, cities would build temples to Rome just to keep the money flowing. So that's the seduction of power, the seduction of money, the seduction of things is there. And that's what she's done. But there's always after effects. In verse 6, we see what's really got God mad. It's not just that she's seducing people and they're pursuing money and wealth and power. It also says in verse 6, I saw the woman was drunk with the blood of God's holy people, the blood of those who bore testimony to Jesus. When you look at the cup of abominations, it looks like wine in the cup, but it's really the blood of the followers of God that have been killed by Babylon, by this woman, by the unholy hooker. Then keep reading verse 6 and into 7. When I saw her, I was greatly astonished. Then the angel said to me, why are you astonished? I will explain to you the mystery of the woman and the beast she rides, which has the 7 heads and the 10 horns. So I'll explain this to you, okay? Why are you astonished? I'll explain to you the mystery. Verse 8, the beast which you saw once was, now is not, yet will come out of the abyss of destruction. He just said, I'm going to explain to you the woman, and the first thing he does, and pretty much the only thing he's really going to do with any detail, is describe to you the beast. Why? Because the woman is simply riding the beast. The woman is the governmental power that is exercising authority, that is seducing the people, that is killing off the people of God. But she thinks she's driving, but all she's doing is riding the beast. The beast is the satanic influence in the world that is actually doing the work. So he's going to actually spend most all of his time describing the beast, not the woman. Okay? The beast which you saw once was, now is not, and yet will come up out of the abyss and go to its destruction. It's coming, it's coming, but it's going to be destroyed. The inhabitants of the earth, whose names have not been written in the book of life from the creation of the world, will be astonished when they see the beast, because it once was, now is not, and yet will come. And here's again this copying that we see Satan doing. Satan is copying God, because we see that phrase, God was, he is, and he will be. And he's saying this one is, the beast is the same way. But there's a real critical distinction John's making. Okay, the beast, just like God was in the past, the beast, just like God, is in the present, and the beast, just like God, will be in the future in Jesus' return. But his ends, the beast ends in the abyss. God is in control. God will win out. Okay, and this, now, in case you hadn't gotten who we're talking about yet, although I have told you, spoiled it a few times already. It says in verse 9, this calls for a mind with wisdom. You have to think this through. That's just used a few times by John. The 7 heads are 7 hills on which the woman sits. And for us, that's going, and so people start going into symbolism, and they're going, well, you see this, and we're trying to find modern stuff. No, Rome was a city built on 7 hills. They were incredibly proud of the fact that they had started as a small colony in the midst of these 7 hills, and now they had built the walls of Rome encompassed all 7 of the hills. They were really proud of that reality, that they had grown so powerful that their walls, and think about how big a city is if it has 7 hills in it, and it is encompassed, the wall is completely around it. And so the wall encompasses the city of 7 hills. This is blatantly Rome. And you go, why doesn't he just say Rome? 2 reasons. Number 1, where do they live? Rome. They're in the Roman Empire. You start spreading stuff that Rome is this terrible, what do you think the Roman government's going to do if they find it? Some of this is just common sense. Okay? If you're in a place like this, you don't go talking bad about them using their word. Oh no, I was talking metaphor. I'm not saying they were scared, but I'm saying they're a little bit prudent. They're a little bit wise. They're being a little bit of common sense here by saying, yeah. But the second one is, and this is something we talked about a lot, and we'll see as we finish this part up. Rome is Babylon is an archetype. It's not the only city. There is, as we would say, there is always a Rome. Throughout human history, there is a Rome. There is a Babylon. There is a Babylon. There is a power that is riding the beast, that is representing the forces of darkness, that is seducing people into the things that are away from God, that are not of God, that the beast is always out on the prowl, and there is always a city, there is always a country lining up and fighting to be the one riding the beast. And so originally, it was the city of Babylon. That's why it's named for that. Babylon was the first. It was the epitome. In the time of John, it is obviously Rome, and he makes it clear. I'm talking about Rome here. Rome's going to do bad things. See, Rome's going to be judged. But as we move forward, we'll always have a Babylon. There's always a Babylon, I believe, and maybe brief periods of time when there's not. Now, and the way that I kind of interpret Revelation is most everything in here is cyclical. Most everything in here returns and recurs. But there will be a time when it is the final Babylon. Okay, there are always, as John says in his other book, there are always antichrists with a small a. Eventually there will be the capital A, Antichrist. There are always Babylons, but there will be the Babylon, and that will be the end of the age. Okay, that's how I take that. Okay, now let's keep going, because here's where it really becomes clear that he's talking about Babylon, he's talking about Rome, but he's not. Okay, because it says they are also 7 kings. So it's got 7 hills, but there's also 7 kings. 5 have fallen, 1 is, the other is not yet come, but when he does come, he must remain for only a little while. Okay? And then the beast who once was and now is not is an eighth king. He belongs to the seven, and it's going to his destruction. And Christian theologians have been working on this for almost 2,000 years, and we can't make the numbers match up. Okay, if you're going to make it Rome as the ultimate, and it could well be that the idea is that when you see this, you go, yeah, it's Rome, but it's not Rome because you can't get the Caesars to fit into that number scheme. And there's a couple things coming out of that. Number one is you know that always, John is more interested in the meaning of the numbers than the literal part of the numbers. Matter of fact, there's places in Daniel where he changes the number from Daniel just to get it to fit into his thing. I mean, the number 7 is the number of completion, so he's going to work really hard. I remember earlier we talked about the fact that like there are words in the book of Revelation that John edited the book in such a way that that word occurs 7 times. The word amen occurs 7 times in the book of Revelation, and the name Jesus occurs 14, which is 2, the number of witnesses, times 7. Okay, so he's always working the numbers to get the symbolism out there. And some people tried to make this work by saying, well, maybe king means kingdom, and there were 7 kingdoms, and we're trying to, and that won't work because this word is used 270 sometimes in the New Testament, the word that means king, and it always means king, never kingdom. It does not mean kingdoms. Okay, and so we've got this thing, and one of the guys I read says John is always more about theology than chronology. Okay, it's more about the symbolism and the power. And I think the other piece of the puzzle is that one thing that might happen is when we get to the final classic end of everything, Babylon, that one the numbers will work out. That we're getting to go, oh, okay, then I'm not sure of that. That's just speculation. But it could be that every time we come to them, we're going to see the numbers don't quite work out. Like well, let me go and read verse 12 and 12 through 14, and I can explain a little more. The 10 horns you saw are 10 kings who have not yet received a kingdom, but for 1 hour will receive authority as kings along with the beast. They have one purpose and will give their power and authority to the beast. They will wage war against the Lamb, Jesus, but the Lamb will triumph over them because he is Lord of lords and King of kings, and with him will be his called, chosen, and faithful followers. Now, like that 10 horns thing, when I was younger, it was all the rage that, it was, you know, Jesus was coming back in the 80s. That was guaranteed. And one way we knew that was the European Common Market, which became the European Union that we have now, had 10 members. There it is. There's the 10. Oh, they added another one. Oops, they added. Oh, never mind. Okay. And so there's the constant struggle to find it. So relax. When the right one, when the official final Babylon comes along, you'll know it. You'll know. You're living in the we're living in the between time. Jesus has left, Jesus is coming back. We live in the between time. Okay? And we live, I believe, we live outside of the inner court. We live outside of the wilderness where everything's protected. We live in the danger zone. Okay? So we're always in the danger zone. We always have to be wise. We always have to be witnessing. And we always have to be aware that one of these times Babylon's going to turn out to be the Babylon. But it may not be this time. I mean, I'm a big proponent of humility. I mean, every time everybody likes to say, oh yeah, this is it. This is definitely the end of the world. Jesus is coming back. This is happening. And I point out the fact that Paul thought Jesus was coming back in his lifetime. Paul was convinced. There's 2 or 3 times Paul says something that very clearly say, yeah, when Jesus comes back to get us, before I die, Billy Graham believed Jesus was coming back in his lifetime. I love me some Billy Graham. I respect that man. I don't know of any man who's been alive in my lifetime who was a public figure in the church that I respect more than Billy Graham. And he was wrong. I mean, so we all know he could come back today. And he might come back in 1,000 years, and we have to live in that humility, that tension, that because we identify a Babylon doesn't mean we've identified the Babylon, even if there are 10 members of the European Common Market. Okay, don't jump. Don't just stand back, let things happen. Because the point isn't who's going to be Babylon, okay? The point is that who's going to be the victor when it's all done. The point is not the beginning, It's not about the 10 kings who've not yet received a kingdom, but who one hour receive authority as kings along with the beast, um, who are setting up for the war against the Lamb. The key is verse 14. They'll wage war against the Lamb, but the Lamb will triumph over them because he is Lord of lords and King of kings, and with him will be his called, chosen, and faithful followers. God's going to win, and we're on his team. That's the important part. That's what matters. And when we spend all our time trying to make it today, we're missing the point. The point is that the woman who represents all of us is secure in the wilderness. And even if we are out in the outer fringes, we are ultimately protected because the Lamb is going to win, and the people of God as a whole, as a corporate entity, are being kept safe. Okay? Let's go ahead and just finish this up. Then the angel said to me, the waters you saw where the prostitute sits are peoples, multitudes, nations, and languages. The beast and the 10 horns you saw will hate the prostitute. Now look at how this ends. See, because this is actually going to tell us that this isn't the last Babylon. He's actually going to tell us right here. This one you're looking at, that's not the last one. Because he said, the beast and the 10 horns you saw will hate the prostitute. They will bring her to ruin and leave her naked. They will eat her flesh and burn her with fire. In other words, this Babylon that you're watching is going to be destroyed by the people who she rules. Okay, she's going to be taken down by them. And it's gross. I mean, she's going to be eaten by them. For God has put it into their hearts to accomplish his purpose by agreeing to hand over the beast to the beast, their royal authority, until God's words are fulfilled. So God is working in history, and this is always destructive, okay? The woman you saw is the great city that rules over the kings of the earth. Just in case you missed it, it's Rome, okay? But the key point is Jesus has got it. The Lamb's going to win. And the other subtle point, sin is destructive. It feeds on itself. At the very end there, the people the woman thought were her servants, the people she thought she had seduced, turn on her, kill her, burn her, eat her. I mean, it's some nasty, nasty stuff. And evil always destroys itself. So as Christians, our job is to speak the truth to people, to not get caught up in their games, okay, which is really hard, okay. But we focus on, well, Luke 10:20. Jesus says after that he sends out his followers, and they go out and they drive out some demons and do some cool stuff. And Jesus says, "Do not rejoice the spirits submit to you, but rejoice that your names are written in heaven." Okay, rejoice that you are part of the woman, the selected one that is safe in the wilderness. I am part of that group, and no matter what happens in the outer court, while I mix my metaphors from Revelation, no matter what happens in the outer court, I am secure, I am safe eternally because of God. So I don't have to, my point is not to focus on who's it going to be and when. My point is that Jesus is going to win whenever, and I'm with him. Okay? All right, that's Revelation 17. See you next time.